She betrayed me in the worst way possible, and I said nothing, not because I forgave her, but because I couldn't even process what she did. Hey guys, welcome back. I've got another Reddit story for you today with some Minecraft parkour in the background. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fun seeing where everyone's watching from. Now, grab a snack, get comfy, and let's get into this one. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the only thing that keeps you sane when your entire world crumbles in a single moment. But let me tell you something about betrayal that nobody talks about. The real damage isn't what they did to you. It's what happens inside your mind when you choose to say absolutely nothing. I'm going to tell you a story today that I have never shared with anyone. Not my family, not my closest friends, nobody. It's about the moment someone I trusted completely destroyed everything we had built together and how my decision to remain silent changed me in ways I'm still discovering. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal isn't confrontation, isn't anger, isn't even tears. Sometimes it's the deafening weight of complete silence. But first, let me paint you a picture of what betrayal actually does to your brain. Because what I experienced that day wasn't just emotional pain. It was a complete rewiring of everything I thought I knew about trust, relationships, and my own judgment. Scientists have discovered that when someone we depend on betrays us, our anterior cingulate cortex lights up like a Christmas tree. That's the same part of your brain that processes physical pain. Your body literally cannot tell the difference between being stabbed and being betrayed by someone you love. Here's what's even more disturbing. Researchers have found that betrayal trauma creates something called betrayal blindness. Your mind actually starts erasing memories and ignoring red flags to protect you from facing the full reality of what happened. It's like your brain decides that acknowledging the truth would be more dangerous than living in denial. And that's exactly what happened to me. The betrayal came on a Tuesday. I remember that detail with crystal clarity because it's funny how your mind holds on to the strangest specifics when everything else becomes a blur. It was one of those ordinary days where you wake up thinking you know exactly who you are and where your life is heading. You have your routines, your expectations, your unshakable beliefs about the people closest to you. And then in the span of about 30 seconds, all of that gets obliterated. She had been my closest friend for over 6 years. We'd been through everything together. Breakups, family deaths, career changes, late-night conversations about our deepest fears and biggest dreams. She was the person I called when something amazing happened. She was also the person I called when my world was falling apart. If you had asked me to list the people I trusted most in this world, she would have been in the top 3 without question. The discovery happened by accident. I wasn't snooping, I wasn't suspicious, I wasn't looking for anything. Sometimes the universe just decides to show you exactly who people really are when you least expect it. I was at her apartment, waiting for her to get ready so we could grab dinner. She had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter and a message notification popped up. The preview was just visible enough for me to see my name and the words that would change everything. What I read in those few seconds wasn't just gossip. It wasn't just talking behind my back. It was a calculated, deliberate campaign to undermine everything I was working toward. For months, while I was confiding in her about my struggles, my insecurities, my plans for the future, she had been systematically sharing those vulnerabilities with people who could use them against me. She had taken my trust and weaponized it. But here's the part that still haunts me. As I stood there reading those messages, watching months of deception unfold in real time, I felt my entire nervous system shut down. Not fight or flight, not anger or tears, complete shutdown. My body went into what psychologists call a hypoarousal state. Everything became distant and foggy, like I was watching someone else's life through thick glass. When she walked back into the kitchen 5 minutes later, I was still standing in exactly the same position. She looked at me, smiled that same smile I'd seen thousands of times before, and asked if I was ready to go. And you know what I did? I said yes. I closed the laptop, I grabbed my jacket, and we went to dinner. For 2 hours I sat across from her at our usual restaurant, listening to her talk about her day, her plans for the weekend, asking me about work like she always did. The entire time, this voice in my head was screaming. Part of me wanted to confront her right there. Part of me wanted to walk out without explanation. Part of me wanted to break down completely. But instead, I just nodded and responded and acted like everything was normal. That dinner was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. Have you ever tried to maintain a normal conversation while your entire understanding of reality is collapsing? It's like trying to have a casual chat while your house is burning down around you. Every word she said felt like it was coming from a stranger wearing the face of someone I loved. The silence I chose that night wasn't strategic. It wasn't calculated. It was pure survival instinct. My brain had essentially decided that acknowledging what I had discovered would be more dangerous than pretending it never happened. This is what betrayal blindness looks like in real time. Your mind literally protects you from processing trauma that feels too big to handle. But here's what nobody tells you about choosing silence after betrayal. It doesn't make the pain go away. It just changes where you carry it. Instead of dealing with the immediate confrontation, instead of having the difficult conversation, instead of processing the grief and anger in a healthy way, you internalize everything. You become a walking time bomb of unprocessed emotion. The weeks that followed were like living in an alternate reality. She would text me like normal. We'd make plans like normal. She'd ask for advice about her problems like normal, and I would respond like normal, all while knowing exactly what she really thought of me, exactly how she had been betraying my trust, exactly what she was probably saying about our conversations to other people. The psychological term for this is cognitive dissonance, and it's absolutely brutal. Your brain is trying to hold two completely contradictory truths at the same time. The person you trusted is also the person who betrayed you. The relationship you valued was also a lie. The friend you thought you knew never actually existed. During this period, I started noticing changes in myself that I didn't understand at the time. I became hypervigilant in all my other relationships, constantly analysing conversations for hidden meanings. I started having trouble sleeping because my mind would replay every interaction we'd ever had, searching for clues I had missed. I developed what felt like a sixth sense for detecting insincerity, but it was exhausting because I was applying that scrutiny to everyone. The most disturbing part was how the silence began to feel normal. After a few weeks of pretending everything was fine, I started to question my own memory of what I had seen. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe there was context I was missing. Maybe I was overreacting. This is betrayal blindness in action. Your mind starts gaslighting itself to avoid dealing with painful realities. What I didn't realize at the time was that my choice to say nothing was actually rewiring my brain. Every day that I chose to maintain the facade, I was reinforcing neural pathways that prioritized avoiding conflict over protecting my own well-being. I was teaching myself that my feelings and my reality mattered less than keeping other people comfortable. The silence became a prison I had built for myself, and I was the only one with the key. The really twisted part about living in this prison of silence is how it starts to distort your perception of every other relationship in your life. When you're carrying around this massive secret, this knowledge that someone you trusted completely has been working against you, it changes the lens through which you view everyone else. I found myself analysing every conversation, every gesture, every moment of kindness from other people, wondering if they too were just putting on an act. It's like being handed a pair of glasses that reveal hidden writing on every page of your life, except you're not sure if the glasses are showing you the truth or if they're making you see things that aren't really there. The paranoia becomes a constant companion. You start to wonder if this is just how the world works. Maybe everyone is betraying everyone, and you've just been too naive to see it before. The most insidious part of betrayal trauma is how it makes you doubt your own judgment. If you could be so completely wrong about someone you thought you knew better than anyone, what else are you wrong about? Who else in your life is wearing a mask? The foundation of trust that allows us to function in relationships, to open up to people, to be vulnerable, gets completely shattered. And when you choose silence, you're essentially choosing to rebuild that foundation alone, in secret, without any help or support. I started having these moments where I would catch myself in conversations with mutual friends, and I would hear them praising her, talking about how loyal she was, how good of a friend she was to people, and I would just sit there, knowing what I knew, feeling like I was living in a parallel universe where everyone else was seeing a completely different person than the one I had discovered. The temptation to speak up in those moments was overwhelming, but the silence had become such a habit that I couldn't figure out how to break it. There's this psychological phenomenon called learned helplessness, where repeated exposure to an uncontrollable situation causes you to stop trying to escape, even when escape becomes possible. That's exactly what happened to me with this secret. The longer I carried it, the more impossible it seemed to ever reveal it. How do you explain to people that you've been living a lie for months? How do you justify why you didn't speak up immediately? The silence becomes self-perpetuating. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. About 3 months after the discovery, I started noticing that she was pulling away from me. Our conversations became shorter, less frequent. She started making excuses when I suggested hanging out. At first I thought maybe she had somehow figured out that I knew about her betrayal. Maybe she was feeling guilty. Maybe she was trying to distance herself before I confronted her. The reality was much worse than that. She was done with me. Whatever purpose I had served in her life, whatever value she had extracted from our friendship, she had gotten what she needed. The cruel irony is that while I was protecting our relationship by staying silent, she was already moving on. I was clinging to something that had never been real in the first place. This is when the silence shifted from being a choice to being a trap. I had invested so much energy in maintaining the facade that I couldn't bear the thought of it all being for nothing. I had protected someone who didn't deserve protection, maintained a relationship that was already over, and sacrificed my own emotional well-being for someone who had never cared about it in the first place. The psychological term for this is the sunk cost fallacy, and it applies to emotional investments just as much as financial ones. The more you've invested in something, the harder it becomes to walk away, even when walking away is clearly the right choice. I had invested months of silence, months of internal torture, months of protecting her reputation and our friendship. Admitting that it had all been pointless felt impossible. During this period, I developed what I can only describe as emotional numbness. It wasn't depression exactly, though it shared some similarities. It was more like my capacity to feel things deeply had been temporarily disabled. Joy felt muted, sadness felt distant, even anger felt like it was happening to someone else. My nervous system had essentially decided that feeling things intensely was too dangerous, so it had dialed everything down to a manageable level. This numbness extended to all areas of my life. I found myself going through the motions at work, in my other relationships, in my daily routines, but nothing felt real or meaningful. It was like I was watching my life happen, rather than actually living it. The silence about the betrayal had created a silence within myself about everything else. What's particularly cruel about betrayal trauma is how it makes you complicit in your own suffering. Every day that I chose not to speak up, I was actively participating in maintaining a false reality. I was protecting someone who had hurt me, enabling someone who had used me, and lying to everyone else in our social circle about the true nature of our relationship. The betrayal had turned me into a betrayer of my own values and well-being. The isolation became overwhelming. I couldn't talk to our mutual friends about what I was going through because it would mean revealing the secret I had worked so hard to keep. I couldn't talk to my other friends because I would have to explain why I had waited so long to tell them. I couldn't talk to my family because I was ashamed of how I had handled the situation. The silence had created a bubble around me that nobody could penetrate. This is when I started to understand that betrayal doesn't just damage your relationship with the person who betrayed you. It damages your relationship with yourself. When you choose to ignore your own knowledge, suppress your own feelings, and act against your own interests to protect someone else, you're essentially betraying yourself. The external betrayal becomes internal, and that's when the real damage happens. The worst part about this internal betrayal is that it's ongoing. Every day that you choose silence, you're choosing to prioritize someone else's comfort over your own truth. You're teaching yourself that your feelings don't matter, that your reality isn't valid, that your pain isn't worth addressing. It's a form of self-gaslighting that can have lasting effects on your self-worth and your ability to trust your own instincts. I began to realize that my silence wasn't protecting anyone. It wasn't protecting her from consequences she deserved to face. It wasn't protecting our mutual friends from difficult truths they had a right to know. And it certainly wasn't protecting me from pain, because I was experiencing all the pain of the betrayal plus the additional pain of carrying it alone. The silence was just redistributing the damage, concentrating it all within me instead of allowing it to be processed and resolved naturally. But even with this realization, breaking the silence felt impossible. The longer you wait to reveal something like this, the more questions you have to answer about why you waited. The story becomes not just about what she did to me, but about what I did to myself and others by keeping it secret. The silence becomes part of the betrayal narrative, and untangling that becomes exponentially more complicated. This is the trap that silence sets for victims of betrayal. It promises immediate relief from conflict and confrontation, but it delivers long-term psychological damage and isolation. It's a deal with the devil that seems reasonable in the moment of shock, but reveals its true cost over time. Looking back now, I can see that the silence was slowly killing parts of me I didn't even know existed. There's this moment that happens when you've been carrying a secret for so long that you start to forget what it felt like before you knew it. The weight becomes so familiar that you can't imagine what your shoulders felt like when they weren't constantly tensed against it. About 6 months after the discovery, something shifted. I was sitting in my car after work, scrolling through social media when I saw a photo she had posted. It was her with a group of people I didn't recognize, laughing at some restaurant I'd never been to. The caption was something about being grateful for authentic friendships and surrounding herself with real people. The irony was so thick I could taste it. But what hit me wasn't anger, it was clarity. For the first time in months, I saw the situation with complete objectivity. This person had moved on with her life completely. She wasn't losing sleep over what she had done to me. She wasn't carrying any guilt or regret. She had extracted what she needed from our friendship and discarded it like an empty container. Meanwhile, I was still protecting her, still carrying her secret, still sacrificing my own peace of mind for someone who had forgotten I existed. That's when I understood the most brutal truth about betrayal trauma. The person who betrayed you gets to walk away clean while you're left holding all the emotional debris. They get to sleep peacefully while you lie awake replaying conversations. They get to move forward while you're stuck in the moment of discovery, frozen in time, unable to process what happened because you've never allowed yourself to fully acknowledge it. The realization was liberating and devastating at the same time. Liberating because it finally broke through the fog of betrayal blindness that had been clouding my judgment. Devastating because it meant accepting that the friendship I had been so desperately trying to preserve had never actually existed in the first place. This is what they don't tell you about betrayal. It's not just about losing a relationship. It's about losing your entire understanding of what that relationship was. Every memory gets recontaminated. Every moment of closeness gets re-examined through the lens of deception. Every time she had comforted me, every time she had given me advice, every time she had acted like she cared, I now had to wonder if it was genuine or if she was just gathering more ammunition to use against me later. The silence I had chosen to protect our friendship had actually prevented me from grieving its loss properly. You can't mourn something while you're still pretending it exists. You can't heal from a wound while you're still denying that you've been hurt. The silence had kept me trapped in a state of suspended animation, unable to move forward or backward. But breaking that silence after 6 months felt impossible for a completely different reason now. It wasn't just about protecting her anymore. It was about protecting myself from the humiliation of admitting how long I had known and done nothing. How do you explain to people that you've been living a lie for half a year? How do you justify choosing to protect someone who was actively working against you? The shame of my own choices had become almost worse than the original betrayal. She had betrayed me once, but I had betrayed myself every single day since then. I had chosen her comfort over my own truth, her reputation over my own well-being, her peace of mind over my own sanity. The silence had turned me into an accomplice in my own destruction. This is when I started to understand that healing from betrayal isn't just about forgiving the person who hurt you. It's about forgiving yourself for how you responded to being hurt. It's about accepting that you made choices from a place of trauma and confusion, and that those choices don't define your worth or your judgment permanently. The path out of silence didn't happen all at once. It started with small acknowledgements to myself, allowing myself to feel angry instead of immediately suppressing it, stopping myself when I caught my mind making excuses for her behavior, refusing to engage in conversations where people praised her without adding my own contradictory evidence. I started seeing a therapist not because I was ready to talk about the betrayal specifically, but because I was beginning to recognize that my relationship with silence had become toxic. I was choosing not to speak up about things that mattered to me in all areas of my life. The betrayal had taught me that my voice didn't matter, and I had internalized that lesson far beyond just that one relationship. The therapist helped me understand that trauma responses aren't choices in the traditional sense. When your nervous system gets overwhelmed, it makes decisions for you based on survival, not logic. The silence wasn't a character flaw or a sign of weakness. It was my brain's attempt to protect me from a threat it didn't know how to handle. But understanding why I had chosen silence didn't automatically make it easier to break. Trauma responses that keep you safe in the moment can become prisons that trap you long after the danger has passed. The silence that had protected me from immediate confrontation was now preventing me from reclaiming my own story and my own power. The breakthrough came almost a year after the discovery, in the most unexpected way. I ran into her at a coffee shop. Not planned, not anticipated, just one of those random encounters that the universe seems to orchestrate when you least expect it. She was with someone I didn't recognize, and when she saw me, her face went through this series of micro-expressions that I would have missed if I hadn't spent months analyzing every interaction we'd ever had. Surprise, guilt, calculation, and then that familiar smile that I now recognized as completely artificial. She approached me with that same energy she'd always had, asking how I was, what I'd been up to, why we hadn't talked in so long. The performance was flawless, but I could see it now for what it was, a performance. And in that moment, something inside me just snapped. Not into anger, not into confrontation, but into clarity. I looked at her and realized that I didn't need her to acknowledge what she had done. I didn't need her to apologize or explain or take responsibility. I didn't need anything from her at all. I said, "I know what you did." That's it. 6 words. No drama, no accusations, no emotional outburst, just a simple statement of fact. and the look on her face told me everything I needed to know about whether my discovery had been accurate. She tried to play dumb, tried to ask what I meant, tried to maintain the performance, but I'd already turned and walked away. After a year of silence, those 6 words were all I needed to say. Not because they would change anything between us, but because they changed everything inside me. The silence was finally broken, not with a confrontation or a dramatic scene, but with a simple acknowledgement of truth. And with that acknowledgement came the most incredible sense of relief I had ever experienced, like I had been holding my breath for a year and could finally exhale. Here's what I learned about silence and betrayal that I wish someone had told me that day in her kitchen. Silence in the face of betrayal isn't always weakness, but it becomes weakness when it prevents you from reclaiming your own story. The person who betrayed you doesn't get to control your narrative forever. At some point, you have to decide that your truth matters more than their comfort. The betrayal taught me that some people will use your trust as a weapon against you. But the silence taught me something even more important. You can't protect yourself from future betrayals by refusing to trust anyone. You can only protect yourself by learning to trust yourself again. To trust your instincts, your perceptions, your right to speak up when something doesn't feel right. If you're watching this and you're carrying around your own secret betrayal, your own burden of silence, I want you to know something. Your feelings about what happened are valid, even if you can't prove it. Your pain matters, even if no one else witnessed it. Your truth deserves to be acknowledged, even if the person who hurt you never takes responsibility for it. The silence might feel safer right now. It might feel like the only way to avoid making things worse. But silence in the face of betrayal isn't neutral. It's not a pause button on the situation. It's an active choice that has consequences for your mental health, your other relationships, and your sense of self-worth. You don't owe your betrayer protection from the consequences of their actions. You don't owe anyone else a comfortable lie that preserves their illusions about someone who hurt you. And most importantly, you don't owe yourself a lifetime of carrying someone else's secrets at the expense of your own peace. Breaking the silence doesn't have to mean confrontation. It doesn't have to mean drama or public scenes or burning bridges. Sometimes it just means refusing to participate in the lie anymore. Sometimes it means trusting one person with your truth. Sometimes it means simply acknowledging to yourself that what happened was real and that it mattered. The betrayal was something that happened to me, but the silence was something I chose. And eventually, breaking it was something I chose too. And that choice, more than anything else, was what gave me my power back. Not because it changed her or punished her or made her sorry, but because it reminded me that I have a voice. And that voice deserves to be heard, especially by me. Your story matters. Your pain matters. Your truth matters. And your silence, while it might feel protective right now, doesn't have to be permanent. When you're ready, your voice will be there waiting for you. And when you find the courage to use it, you'll remember who you really are underneath all that weight you've been carrying. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do after betrayal isn't revenge or confrontation or even forgiveness. Sometimes it's simply refusing to carry their secrets anymore. Sometimes it's choosing your own peace over their protection. Sometimes it's remembering that you deserve better than a life lived in silence.